Well, as you're probably already aware, there's not a lot that leader of the ACT Party and now Deputy Prime Minister David Seymour and I agree on. There's a few, but one of the concerns that we do share is the behaviour of the mainstream media. And recently, David Seymour did what I think any interviewee of the news media needs to do whenever they are interviewed: take their own recording of the conversation. And in a recent interview between David Seymour and TVNZ's John Campbell, the coverage was so revealing that TVNZ did something it doesn't usually do and published the full interview proactively, including the chatter before the interview formally started. They don't usually show all that, even though I warn people that the camera and mics are always on when speaking with the media. Now, I suspect they did this because of what it revealed, and they knew that the ACT Party were going to release it anyway. So let's check it out. It's a fun watch. Now, just a reminder, if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the Family First channel so you can stay aware of all our new material each week. And if you want to be notified when we drop a new episode of McBlog or Family Matters or start live streaming shows or other live stream shows, then click the link to get notified. Now, at the beginning of 2019, we released some exclusive polling to One News, TVNZ's One News. Sometimes when you have a breaking story or an exclusive poll to release, you can sometimes get more interest from the media if they know you're the first to have the story to them. So in other words, they get the exclusive rather than a general media release. And we did this with this polling. We offered it to the 6 p.m. news on TVNZ. And they ran a story on their website entitled "Strong Public Support for Cafes, Other Businesses to Block Porn Sites on In-Store Wi-Fi." And they said, a new poll suggests there is strong support for cafes and other businesses to block pornography. It comes after Starbucks Coffee rolled out an international block in this year following consumer pressure. Family First commissioned the poll by Courier Market Research that found 79% of respondents thought there should be adult filters in place for public Wi-Fi, with 16% opposed and 6% unsure. Bob McCoskey of Family First said the result was indicative of the growing community concern over this issue. Family First supporters went around some cafes and fast food restaurants testing if they could access pornography on the Wi-Fi, finding some blocked pornography and some did not. It was pretty good and accurate reporting. But here's the 6 p.m. news report by the intrepid reporter Benedict Collins. Notice the focus of his report. Note the sarcasm, not focusing on the result, the implications, the actual problem at hand, but getting all excited about how we tested the premise of what the problem was. Even though Starbucks, a major company that can't make a decent coffee to save itself, had already admitted there was consumer pressure to deal with the issue. And note especially Benedict's final comment.
Fancy a little pornography with your latte? It's definitely not everyone's cup of tea, and Starbucks points out such behaviour's rare. But it recently put filters in place to stop customers accessing porn sites. And here, Family First believes there's a problem.
But I think if you're sitting in a cafe and you've got children with you, you don't want to be sitting next to someone who is accessing hardcore pornography through the free Wi-Fi system.
The group commissioned a poll which asked 1,000 Kiwis if businesses with free Wi-Fi should be required to have filters blocking porn websites. 79% were in favour. 16% were opposed. The rest not venturing an opinion. While Kiwis have been getting out and enjoying their summer breaks, Family First have been travelling to cafes and restaurants to see if they can access porn. I asked Family First if they were worried that the public might think they're a little bit weird. There are a range of tools available that businesses can use to block content.
They are there for people that want them. The question, I suppose, becomes in how easy or whether or not these things should be forced upon individuals, whether or not it becomes compulsory or not, and that's certainly a much bigger question.
Perhaps one to ponder over a long black. And if you do see someone looking at porn, it could pay to remember They might just be from Family First. Benedict Collins, One News.
Yeah. You can see why Benedict will never get another exclusive from Family First. And in fact, you'll be lucky to get any response from us ever again. We weren't expecting a soft report going on about how great Family First was. We just didn't expect such a juvenile report, which was actually avoiding the actual issue. In fact, we just got some woman to actually, it was very easy, just stand outside a cafe, you can access the Wi-Fi that's available, quickly see if they were able to start to access some dodgy websites. Very easy, but that's not the way Benedict Collins wanted to explain it. But it does explain, and it's not the only example, of why I don't have the greatest trust for the mainstream news media. Some of the journalists I do, not Benedict obviously, but in general, I'm far more cautious than trusting, sadly. And it seems like David Seymour feels the same way. In fact, it's become common practice for senior political leaders and now other people being interviewed by the media to record the whole conversation. You can often see a staffer behind senior political figures holding up their iPhone and recording the whole conversation, so that if and when the comments by the politician are reported, the interviewee can then say, well, hang on, here's a full transcript of what I actually said in full. And more people are doing that on social media, publishing the whole interview to undermine the narrative that the mainstream media may be pushing. It's sad that it's come to this. So let's check the interview between David Seymour and John Campbell. And it doesn't start well, because David claims that John made a statement about what David Seymour probably said when asked for an interview. And you'll see John Campbell say, well, I wouldn't say that, but then basically admits that he probably did say that or something like that. But it's because he's so self-deprecating. Yeah, right. And remember, John Campbell is slightly thrown that the ACT Party are doing their own reporting of this interview. And this doesn't sit too well with the media, who have always set the narrative. Now, I've added subtitles just so that you can see what's being said. The subtitles aren't always 100% correct. Just know.
How are you? Not too bad. Yeah, you too. No, not a worry.
Thank you.
I gather you were surprised we'd accept the interview.
I didn't say that.
I gather you used the C word in reference to how we were supposed to regard you.
I don't think I did that.
Oh,
Come here.
fair enough. Maybe it was a misunderstanding.
Have you just come out of Parliament?
Yeah.
And what happened?
Well, surprise, surprise, the debate was adjourned.
And this is the debate on the privileges for the 21 days.
Yep. So the debate's adjourned. It'll come back in a few weeks, and in the meantime,
Yeah.
we have a budget to pass.
Yeah.
So, you just want me here?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Not happy.
Nice to see you.
You too, John.
Thank you. Thank you. What was that? What was that about? What was that little arrival about?
Well, I was just surprised to hear from my staff that you'd said that word. I mean, I know you've been surpassed more recently, but I just found it interesting.
It was, yeah. So are you playing to Andy here? Was that for social media?
No. I'm not playing to anyone. I wanted to ask you.
Yeah. I think what I tend to do now when I'm asking for interviews, because people aren't always pleased to hear from me, is be reasonably self-deprecating. I think that would be a fair description of how I approach this moment.
So that is what you said.
I can't remember.
Oh, okay, right. But it's plausible.
I wouldn't even say it was plausible. I think what I do is I tend to go in and give people the right to say.
Yeah.
Which I would think was a position. Was that the position I was coming from?
Well, people already have the right, though. I mean, you needn't give them the right. They already have it.
Yeah. And you said yes. I really appreciate it.
Oh, of course, John. We're very available, despite what people may have said or written before. We show up.
You don't get one report, though, do you? Why is that?
Why is that? Mainly because of their off-air behaviour,
Right.
and their highly selective choice of stories. Sorry, mate.
That's okay.
Hang on, there's my phone. Look, I think the thing with those guys, so there were basically three issues. One was that when we did what we regard as really important, serious stuff, like unleashing an alternative budget, they just weren't interested.
Yeah.
Second of all, a lot of the young staff were very rude
Yeah.
And thirdly, they'd get me on for one thing, because they'd actually basically lie about what they wanted us on for,
Yeah.
and then start asking me about something else. And I said, look, if you'd just said, you know. So then I thought, well, gee, I actually don't need this in my life.
Yeah.
And over that time that I've refused to go on, we've gone gangbusters. They've gone like that, and I've maintained a really good relationship with everyone else at Radio New Zealand, who I generally like. So it's up to them to change.
The gallery team at Radio New Zealand, right?
I actually am on the record saying that Jane ran the best team in the gallery, and I think Joe's carried it on.
Yeah. I just want to come back to that arrival. Because I think it was just an odd way to arrive. It was a kind of bristling, slightly alpha way to arrive.
Really?
Right. Alpha. Yeah, I suppose saying, hello, how are you, and all of that.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and also Simon, I think, in good faith, I thought that was actually quite a sweet and endearing conversation with you and I. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, I'm surprised that this is being kind of weaponized. Is that what?
No, not at all, John. Just you know, I was just having a bit of banter. Now, if you'd like to start your interview, we're here.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That's clearly thrown you, hasn't it?
No, it's not thrown me. Not at all. I've been doing this for a long time.
Okay.
I mean, I've been interviewing politicians. I was in the gallery 30 years ago.
Far out.
But that's that first Bolger. I was in Tekwiti on the election night.
Moses Bolger, Tekwiti.
Might more. Anyway.
So anyway, you go to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So no, it's just I think for me it's emblematic of the relationship you've got with the media now, and we'll talk about that later.
Yes, emblematic of the relationship you've got with the media, and you can see why David Seymour doesn't go on Morning Report on Radio New Zealand if that's the way they act. So the interview continues, but it's quite clear that John Campbell is still very thrown or annoyed about Andy, the ACT Party cameraman. And then, of course, comes the how can we be nice and civil question. Once again, as though the media is the victim.
We've got Andy over here. So Andy, hi Andy, nice to see you. So Andy is rolling on this. This is presumably for David versus the media?
Something like that.
Yeah. For your social media page?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that seems to me to be being very good at politics, right? So what Andy's doing is he's going to put it up.
Well, it's not politics though. I mean,
No, it is. It's about speaking directly to a constituency, isn't it? And what are your big?
Well, we go to duty to be open to people, and what we found is that for years people in the media abused the power to edit. You know, I would build relationships with people, I'd talk to people, I'd give the best quotes I could describing what we stood for our voters, and then I found at 6 o'clock the media had abused the power to edit. So we said, you know what, if they
abuse, that's a kind of pejorative description.
It is.
Yeah, exactly what I just showed you with the Benedict Collins story on our research. Anyway.
It is.
I mean, I did 6 o'clock news for many years. Tough business because the stories are 2.5 minutes long. You might do an interview with David Seymour who's, I don't know, the interview might be 7 minutes long. You might do an interview with Chris Hipkins who's totally disagreeing with you. The interview might be 7 minutes long. You might do an interview with Chloe Swarbrick. So suddenly you have 20 or 30 minutes raw material you have to condense into a 2-minute story.
Well, look, I don't deny that you've got a format where you've got to crunch down. The question is, if you're good at that, you accurately convey what the person's trying to say. Now, it might interest you to know, I've just done 35 street corner meetings. I stand on the corner in the Epsom electorate. And if you've read that article, every single, Daniel McLaughlin, the journalist, will confirm, every single one on the day he came, and I can tell you it's basically every day that we did them, people ask, what's the problem with the media? And so I take your point. You do, as an editor, have to condense down a long interview into a soundbite. I get that. One of my skills is giving a soundbite because I have to. But what we're doing here with David versus the media, remember, we're getting 50. I mean, you're one of our stars on the ACT YouTube channel. It's not a good thing. But in any event, it's not a good thing.
Isn't it?
No, we're getting people who just want to see it raw and see. And I'm just saying, look, you know, the power to edit has been abused too many times, and we've taken that power away.
So what will a good viewing get? What will it get?
Oh, $250,000.
$250,000. So this is about the politics, isn't it? You tell me you're not good at politics, but actually you're very good at it.
No, I've just taken it. See, I'm an engineer, so I just take a very basic observation, right, which is that we want to ensure that people can see.
Do you cut the stuff, or does it go raw every time?
Goes up raw every
Yeah.
time.
So what we want to ensure is that people can understand what their representatives are up to.
Yeah,
That's how the system
was
works.
So did you workshop today coming in and David hitting me with that line up the front? Was that just
No. I mean, I tell you what, one thing I know, I've dealt with a lot of conspiracy theorists. And I'm not saying you are, I'm just saying that usually most things in the world aren't planned the way you think they are.
Yeah. So how do we have a constructive relationship? Because it seems to me that no one wins when we all are bristling and regarding ourselves with suspicion. And how do you and I, actually I have to say that you and I, whenever we do broadcast interviews, on the rare occasion you and I spoke to each other on breakfast, I always thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I think the last time you were on, you said afterwards, it was a great interview, I enjoyed it. But
I think that's the one that got 100,000 views.
how do we have civilized discourse? How do we do this?
Just by being open and honest, which I always am. I think this interview's going really well. I think people can see and make up their own mind based on what they're seeing in the interview, and I think that's a positive thing. I love that interview that Daniel McLaughlin's done, because he's basically just presented warts and all. There's aspects of the article.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now, the one other clip worth watching is where David Seymour puts a question back to John Campbell that John Campbell can't answer. And then, as is the usual approach, becomes very indignant about a particular point. Have a watch.
What you and I both know about Māori is that Māori are disproportionately likely to do bad in every conceivable measure. 7 years shorter life expectancy. More than
Just note that the subtitles doesn't cope with the word Māori either.
50% of the prison population. Disproportionately likely to
Oh,
live
John, we've had this debate. Do you want to have it again? So here's the question.
Neo-feudalism. I would say in the neo-feudalism.
So why do you think Māori live 7 years less? On
Colonisation.
average, really?
Absolutely.
So let me ask you. So no, let me ask you this question. Why do Asians live longer than European New Zealanders? Is that because of colonisation too?
No,
Well, there must be a reason for that. What is it?
but wait a sec. You asked me.
No. So I asked you a fair question. Why do you?
No.
Your contention is that Māori live shorter lives because of colonisation, but you can't explain why Asians live longer lives.
Well, Asian New Zealanders haven't been colonised.
Okay, but they still live longer lives.
But they haven't been colonised. I
Well, neither of European New Zealanders.
I just talked about oranges, and you've just introduced an apple to the Asian.
No, I haven't at all.
Okay, so
I
you
haven't.
asked me the question.
The apple,
You asked me the question.
the oranges.
Why do Māori live 7 years shorter
Why do you
life
suppose?
than non-Māori? Why?
I believe that there are a number of factors.
Colonisation?
One really obvious one is smoking. Now we know one of the things that's really not contested is that smoking shortens your life. Another thing that we know from surveys going back to year dot in New Zealand is that Māori have higher rates of smoking. So you would expect that to affect your life expectancy. Now another, frankly, is human-on-human violence. That can shorten your life, sadly. And we know from the statistics that Māori are more likely to be victims of crime. So
Isn't that generational? That sense of damage isn't
Yeah,
that
but here's the problem with your argument. Apart from the fact that you can't answer the Asian question, colonisation.
Hold on. You raised the Asian question. The Asian question is manifestly ridiculous.
Why?
I asked you a question about why Māori have a 7 year shorter life expectancy than non-Māori.
Yeah.
And you've said to me, what about Asians? I don't actually. What point are you making?
Because I'm challenging your answer that colonisation is the explanation of everything. I don't believe it is.
Haven't been colonised.
Neither have European New Zealanders, but they don't live as long as Asians. So my point to you is, John, if you believe everything's about colonisation, then what's your answer? Decolonise? You want to send people home? My answer is let's break down to the actual facts.
Did I say I want to send people home?
Well, no.
Decolonization isn't about sending people home. Who says
okay.
decolonization is about sending people home? You're using a lot of reductio ad absurdum arguments.
No.
You are.
No.
Who suggested?
Okay.
Has anyone, name me the person who said decolonization is about sending people home. Name one person.
You're allowed to use rhetoric. I'm sure that there are people who said that.
No, hold on a second.
Yeah.
That was completely disingenuous and wrong. It was wrong in fact, and it was wrong in a who, name me one person. One. Now I'm just going to sit here until you name them. We can let the cameras run.
Okay, and I'll keep talking because it's a rhetorical question, John. It doesn't matter if anybody has. The point is that there's an absurdity and expecting you can reverse colonization.
Yeah, it's very interesting, but we've already called out the media in the same way that David Seymour has. You might remember last year we did a McBlog entitled New Zealand Media's Propagandisation of the US Election. Examples after examples of the New Zealand news media thinking you're idiots and that you'll fall for anything. And their propaganda coverage of the US election. As I warned, you can be sure they're doing it to many other issues as well. Now, the New Zealand Herald actually reported on this David versus John show over the weekend. They said ACT leader and Deputy Prime Minister David Seymour has turned the camera on TVNZ broadcaster John Campbell, with the politician using his own cameraman to film a recent interview in a tactical move to ensure the media don't shape the narrative. A TVNZ spokeswoman said Campbell's interview with Seymour and Winston Peters were made available at the same time and in full on TVNZ Plus before an edited version on One News at 6. These had been available for weeks and in advance of the ACT Party posting its own footage, TVNZ said. Now, Seymour responded, "It's certainly true that they put the raw footage of the Campbell interview up prior to us releasing footage. They knew that we were going to release the footage. So they didn't need to wait for us to put it up to change their behaviour." He said it was unusual to see raw footage of an interview posted in full. I certainly can't think of any other examples. And I suspect that Seymour is correct. I stumbled across, just preparing this, I stumbled across another member of the mainstream media, Radio New Zealand's Jessie Mulligan, who used to be on The Project and did that fawning interview of Jacinda Ardern recently about her book. But he was lamenting what had happened between Seymour and Campbell. But here's the interesting comment that he makes in his Substack. He says, now the left is stuck. The left is stuck with a new problem. Not only are its messages more subtle and wholesome than the vote-grabbing slogans of the populist right. Good to know where you stand on all that, Jesse. But voters are now getting all of their information from asynchronous broadcasters like YouTube, which scout for videos featuring the most awful aspects of human interaction and supercharge their audience reach. Oh dear, poor Jesse is worried that videos are popular on YouTube because people like watching them. I mean, there's an example of the worst of the media mentality. Now, as I mentioned, there's a lot that David Seymour and I disagree on, but we share a deep suspicion of the news media. A suspicion shared by the overwhelming majority of New Zealanders who no longer trust the news media. And David Seymour gave us a simple media training lesson. Control the narrative by showing the media that you will keep them accountable to the facts and not the spin. It's a win-win.